Before sunrise on October 10, 2025, the port of Novorossiysk on the Black Sea lay beneath a blanket of fog, the kind of silence that hides intentions more than it hides sound. Beneath the orange glow of sodium lamps, cranes moved with mechanical patience, lifting containers from a Chinese-flagged freighter that had docked under diplomatic clearance hours earlier. Officially, it carried industrial machinery bound for Russian energy sites. Unofficially, it carried something else, something capable of rewriting the balance of an entire war. Among the rows of shipping containers, one was marked ALH-455, its steel walls bearing the red emblem of China's Norinco Group. To most, it looked like any other piece of cargo, but inside, secured in foam-cradled precision, lay the DF-11 short-range ballistic missile, a weapon with a range of nearly 190 miles and a warhead powerful enough to erase a city district in seconds. The transfer was not recorded, not declared, and not meant to be seen by any eye, human or otherwise. Yet above the fog, a single Ukrainian satellite was watching. Part of Kiev's Lonter space system, its sensors cut through the mist and night like a scalpel. At 03:47 a.m., it captured a frame that would ignite a chain reaction no general could stop. The image was grainy but undeniable. 15 missile trucks forming up in convoy, guarded by 20 Chinese soldiers. Within 9 seconds, the signal traveled across space, bounced through encrypted relays, and landed inside the underground command center in Kiev. No speeches were given, no debate was held. The algorithm spoke first. Ukraine's AI-based recognition system analyzed the transmission through 128 filters: heat, frequency, motion, insignia, geometry. The verdict was instant, the conclusion chilling. The convoy was moving DF-11 missiles toward Belgorod, just 60 miles from the Ukrainian border. If they reached their forest base, Russia would gain the ability to strike deep into Kharkiv with devastating precision. Inside the command room, the silence was almost sacred. Screens glowed cold blue as officers watched the red icons crawl northward across digital maps. It wasn't merely a supply movement, it was an escalation, a declaration wrapped in secrecy. China was now, beyond plausible denial, supplying Russia's front lines under the cover of darkness. The next decision came not from emotion, but from necessity. Activate Operation Night Veil. Those 4 words dropped like stones into a still pond. Within minutes, encrypted signals raced across Ukraine's defense grid. Reaper drones warmed their engines. Electronic warfare units powered up. A network that had been dormant for months suddenly came alive, its heartbeat synchronized by machine precision. While the world slept, Ukraine prepared to strike first. Not with tanks or artillery, but with algorithms, satellites, and drones small enough to fit in a soldier's backpack. It wasn't just a military response, it was a statement that in the age of information, surprise belonged not to the aggressor, but to the observer. High above the Black Sea, the launcher satellite adjusted its trajectory, maintaining lock on the moving convoy. Its data flow merged with that of ground-based sensors, radar intercepts, and heat-tracking drones. Together, they formed what one analyst would later call the digital omniscience of modern war, a real-time picture where every truck, every turn, every heartbeat of the enemy could be predicted before it happened. At 03:52 a.m., the first human order followed the machine's suggestion: intercept before the border. The AI had already projected the convoy's rest stop, 12 miles ahead, near an abandoned fuel depot often used by Russian logistics. The target zone was set. The clock began. Somewhere in the depths of the command center, a young operator whispered, "It feels like we're watching the first move of something much bigger." He was right, because this wasn't just a military event. It was the first proof that warfare had crossed the threshold, that decisions could now be made, justified, and executed in less time than it takes to light a cigarette. At the same time, 400 miles to the south, the convoy rolled on, its drivers unaware that they were already ghosts in a digital crosshair. The engines hummed low, headlights dimmed. Around them, the forest of Belgorod swallowed sound and light alike. The men in those trucks believed they were invisible, but invisibility in 2025 had already become obsolete. In Kiev, a wall of monitors displayed lines of encrypted code. Each line a heartbeat of the operation, each symbol a step closer to war. Outside, the night sky looked calm. But above that calm, in orbit, the watchers kept watching. Their eyes never blinked. Their memory never faded. And in those final minutes before the strike was authorized, something larger than strategy unfolded. A shift in the way nations perceive power itself. For decades, global dominance was measured in fleets, armies, and warheads. But on that cold October morning, it was measured in data speed, signal precision, and the intelligence of machines. The world hadn't realized it yet, but the Black Sea was no longer a boundary between nations. It was a battlefield between algorithms. The message that left Kiev that morning contained no emotion, no rhetoric, and no flag. Just a single encrypted line. Operation Night Veil initiated. And with that, history moved quietly into its next phase. One where silence carried more weight than any speech, and the war of men gave way to the war of machines. At 4:05 a.m., the sky over Belgarad's forests looked serene, but peace was an illusion. 10,000 feet above, a Reaper MQ-9 drone held steady, its sensors whispering across the night air. Through its thermal cameras, the forest below glowed with movement. 15 missile trucks, 4 armored escorts, and 2 command jeeps crawling north at 38 miles per hour. Each carried part of a deadly equation, the DF-11 short-range ballistic missile, a weapon with a range of nearly 190 miles, and a warhead powerful enough to erase a city district in seconds. In the moment, Ukraine's operators were not just watching a convoy, they were watching a rolling arsenal of destruction, a moving city's worth of death on wheels. Inside Kiev's underground command center, the air was thick with static and purpose. The glow of monitors painted faces pale blue. Technicians tracked every heartbeat of data streaming in. Over 400 gigabytes per minute, a torrent of raw intelligence fed through the neural network known as Spectre, Ukraine's battlefield AI. Spectre didn't tire, didn't hesitate. It calculated probabilities, mapped enemy behavior, and identified the convoy's command vehicle by its subtle radio bursts, a 4.3 gigahertz frequency that pulsed out of rhythm with the others. Machines had learned to find patterns even chaos couldn't hide. By 4:10 a.m., Spectre's models predicted where the convoy would pause, a fuel depot 12 miles ahead, a relic from the early days of the war. That would be the ambush point. The order was issued through secure fiber links. Deploy ground units. 2 MTLB armored vehicles, call signs Echo 1 and Echo 2, moved out under complete radar blackout. Their destination? The narrow stretch of road that cut through the woods like a vein. Inside their steel hulls sat Ukraine's newest secret, Echo Trap, an experimental electronic warfare module capable of reflecting radio waves and confusing enemy sensors. It was the digital equivalent of turning a mirror against a sniper. As the Ukrainian teams dug into position, Russia's own defense systems began to stir. 8 miles to the south, a Bukhmak 2 air defense unit caught sight of a faint radar echo, a small Ukrainian scout drone hovering too low, too slow. A missile streaked through the darkness at Mach 3.5, vaporizing it in midair. The explosion rippled across the tree line, echoing like distant thunder. Within minutes, Russian operators launched 2 Orlan-10 surveillance drones, their signals pulsing across the night sky, broadcasting powerful jamming waves designed to blind enemy electronics. The forest became a battlefield of invisible frequencies. But Ukraine had anticipated this. As the Orlans began their sweep, Echo 1 activated Echo Trap. The machine captured the 4.3 gigahertz jamming pulse, inverted it, and sent it back like a distorted reflection. Within seconds, the Russian drones began broadcasting false coordinates to themselves. Their guidance systems faltered. They spun out of alignment, their sensors lost in a loop of their own signal. For 172 seconds, Russia's jamming grid went dark. It was a blackout window worth millions of dollars, bought with ingenuity and code.
In that brief silence, the convoy rolled unsuspecting into the kill zone. 15 missile trucks entered the clearing, headlights slicing through the mist. The Dravers had no reason to fear. The radar was clean, the airwaves silent. But above them, algorithms had already drawn a digital box around their position, precise to within 12 feet. At 4:16 a.m., Kiev sent a single encrypted message to the field teams: "Execute Strike Alpha." The next 30 seconds were a study in controlled chaos. Inside Echo 2, two operators turned ignition keys simultaneously. From the forest floor, 20 FPV kamikaze drones launched like a swarm of hornets, their propellers slicing the fog. Each drone weighed just over 4 pounds and carried a 2-pound shaped charge, small, cheap, but deadly. In unison, they climbed to 200 feet, synchronized through laser pulse telemetry refreshing 20 times per second. Then, like a flock of predatory birds, they broke formation and descended in a pattern only the AI understood. 10 drones locked onto fuel trucks, 5 targeted missile trailers, and 5 aimed for command vehicles. On Russian radar screens, dozens of ghost echoes appeared, reflections and decoys from the Echo Trap system. Operators inside the nearby Panzer S-1 air defense unit struggled to make sense of it. Their radars flickered between empty sky and false contacts. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. At 4:17:10 a.m., the first drone struck. A direct hit into a tanker carrying 620 gallons of diesel. The explosion lit the forest in a bloom of orange fire, registering 3.2 on local seismic sensors. In 8 seconds, 2 more drones slammed into missile bays. The chain reaction began. One DF-11 warhead detonated, triggering the next in a domino of white fire. The blast front expanded at 1,700 feet per second, tearing through steel, trees, and bone alike. What had been a convoy was now a storm of molten shrapnel. Russian soldiers scrambled, firing blindly into the smoke. The Panzer attempted a counter-salvo, launching 3 E-6 interceptor missiles, each worth $90,000. All 3 missed, deceived by distorted telemetry. The cost of failure burned with every second, human and financial alike. Within 4 minutes, 15 trucks, 4 escorts, and 2 command jeets had been reduced to flaming skeletons. The forest canopy glowed red, then white, then black. The heat spike reached 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit, melting glass and warping asphalt. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. At 4:20 a.m., silence reclaimed the forest. The Reaper drone's thermal feed showed no movement, no survivors. The air shimmered with residual heat, and the ground smoldered where $120 million in advanced weaponry had stood minutes before. In Kiev, applause was brief. The analysts knew what they had achieved, but they also knew what it meant. 20 homemade drones, built from 3D printed parts and salvaged electronics, had destroyed a convoy worth more than most nations' yearly defense budgets. The cost-to-destruction ratio was 4,800 to 1. The age of drones had matured into something else entirely, the age of autonomous annihilation. The operation's codename would soon leak among intelligence circles, Operation Night Veil. But within Ukraine's command, another phrase began to circulate quietly: the forest that fought back. Because in those few minutes before dawn, amid fire and silence, a new truth had emerged: that intelligence, once measured in generals and spies, was now written in code and executed by machines. And from that night onward, no army on Earth could claim the sky was theirs alone. By 4:21 a.m., the echo of the explosion still rolled across the valleys of Belgarod's forests. The fire had begun to fade, but its memory was carved into the earth itself. Where 15 missile trucks once stood, there was now only ruin. Blackened steel twisted like bones, molten tracks carved into the mud, and a crater 35 feet wide glowing like an open furnace. The air shimmered with heat. The silence that followed was not peace, but the absence of anything left to destroy. From orbit, the Lanter satellite made another pass. Its infrared sensors confirmed what human eyes could not deny: total destruction. The convoy was gone. Every DF-11 missile casing was split apart, every vehicle rendered unsalvageable. The data streamed into Kiev's command center, and within seconds, the AI displayed a single word on the main interface: objective complete. Applause broke out, but only for a moment, because everyone in that darkened room understood what they had done and what it meant. The operation had not just erased a weapons convoy, it had shattered the illusion of technological invincibility. In under 5 minutes, a swarm of 20 drones worth less than a family car had dismantled a joint Russian-Chinese military transfer valued at $120 million. The event would soon be studied, debated, and feared. But at that exact moment, in the stillness after the flames, no one dared to celebrate. They had just changed the rules of war. On the Russian side, confusion reigned. Local radar stations misread the aftermath as an artillery strike. The nearby Pantsir S-1 battery, still blind from echo trap interference, launched 2 more missiles worth nearly $200,000 each, both into empty sky. One exploded mid-air, scattering its own debris across the base perimeter. Radio operators screamed into static-filled headsets, trying to reach a command that no longer answered. The forest burned for 20 more minutes, an inferno fed by diesel and shattered warheads. By the time emergency crews arrived, it was already too late. 55 soldiers, including at least 22 Chinese personnel, were dead or missing. Nothing remained but ashes and silence. At 5 a.m., the first Russian news bulletin appeared. State media called it a fuel transport accident, a logistics mishap in poor weather. But even as Moscow tried to bury the truth, satellite companies like Maxar Technologies began releasing independent imagery. The coordinates matched perfectly with those in Ukraine's operation logs: 50.499 degrees north, 36.618 degrees east. The crater, over 10 meters deep, told its own story. Within hours, the world's intelligence networks had pieced together what had really happened. A $25,000 swarm of Ukrainian drones had wiped out one of Russia's most secretive arms transfers, along with its Chinese advisors. The cover story collapsed before sunrise.
In Kiev, the mood was solemn. The analysts didn't see themselves as heroes. They were technicians, operators, soldiers behind screens. Their victory was not celebrated with medals, but with silence. They understood that this was no ordinary strike. It was a message, and every superpower on Earth had just received it. When dawn broke over Ukraine, the Belgar crater became the most studied piece of land on the planet. NASA's Terra probe, Maxar's orbiters, and Ukraine's Landsat constellation all confirmed the same data: a 112-foot impact zone, heat signatures peaking at 1,420 degrees Fahrenheit, and over 300,000 pounds of obliterated hardware. The numbers alone rewrote military logic. The cost-to-destruction ratio was beyond precedent: 1 to 5,000. It was a miracle of efficiency and a nightmare for every defense planner still relying on 20th century doctrine. But with triumph came danger. Within 36 hours, both Moscow and Beijing filed formal protests at the United Nations, accusing Ukraine of an unprovoked act of aggression on Russian soil and the killing of Chinese personnel. Ukraine's official response was curt and deliberate. The convoy carried weapons of war. We removed them. Behind closed doors, Western intelligence called it the 5-minute miracle. In Washington, analysts ran simulations showing how similar drone swarms could overwhelm armored divisions, naval fleets, even missile silos. One Pentagon source said quietly, "No nation in modern history has ever achieved that much impact with that little hardware." Yet beneath the praise, unease grew. The operation had revealed the terrifying truth of the algorithmic battlefield, a realm where AI decides, drones execute, and humans merely observe. In those 5 minutes, the line between operator and weapon had blurred beyond recognition. The soldiers who launched the drones had not seen their targets. The machines had done the seeing, the choosing, and the killing. Ukraine had demonstrated brilliance, but it had also opened a door humanity might not be able to close again. By 7:10 a.m., the smoke over Belgorod thinned into gray ribbons that twisted in the morning light. From orbit, the scene looked like a scar across the Earth.
black, perfect, geometric. In Kiev's underground command room, the operators removed their headsets one by one. There were no cheers, only the quiet hum of cooling processors and the weight of realization they had just redefined modern warfare. The mission had cost less than a luxury car, yet it had vaporized a missile convoy protected by multiple layers of air defense and millions of dollars in equipment. Hours later, international news networks finally caught up. Russia repeated its story of a fuel explosion. China denied any involvement, but the satellites told another truth, a truth too bright to be buried. Intelligence communities began whispering a new code name for the event, Operation Silent Forest. To the public, it was a footnote in a long war. To Ukraine, it was proof that ingenuity could outthink empires, that in an age of superpowers and sanctions, intelligence could be the ultimate equalizer. Still, a question lingered in every analyst's mind, one that no data could answer. If this war could now be won by algorithms, satellites, and drones no larger than birds, what would come next? Because somewhere above the clouds, new machines were already watching, silent, patient, waiting for their turn. And as the sun rose over the Black Sea, the world below stepped quietly into a new kind of conflict, one fought not by nations, but by networks. The war of tomorrow had already begun.